Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to go over another guide, this time on threat, both single target and AoE. I've been getting a lot of questions on how to hold AoE threat from everyone, so let's get right to it. I did run a mythic here for some examples, so let's just go over what you need to know. So first, let's take a look at AoE threat. I do have Omen here. I normally have it hidden behind my DPS meters because I can just take a look real quick at a corner of it, but I'm going to make it really nice and big here so that I can point stuff out. Let's jump into an AoE pack. You're also going to see my AoE and cleave abilities here, and you'll be able to see exactly when I use them, how they go into my general rotation. As a tank, you need to make sure that you do not miss your cleave abilities. If you miss them, that's when you might lose some of the pack. So make sure you hit your cleave abilities on all targets and get your AoE down in a place where everybody's going to stack on it and you can keep getting that threat generated. One thing that you do need to keep in mind is while you're AoEing and you have to keep rotating your cleaves, you can't just stop using your active mitigation. So here on the screen, I'm going to show you exactly what your active mitigation is depending on your class. Also your AoE and your cleave abilities. This is what I'm talking about when I say AoE and cleave and active mitigation. So while you're rotating your AoE and your cleave, always make sure you're also maintaining a good focus on your active mitigation, or else you'll go down. Just as simple as that. You're not actively mitigating, you're going to be taking way more damage. There's a lot more targets hitting you at the exact same time, and that's going to be pretty devastating for you. Now, one other thing to note with AoE targets is that everyone in your group should understand what the priority is. So when you run into a mob, whether you charge or just run in, you should do a really big threat generating ability. For warriors, it's shield slam on the focus target and then start focusing on AoE. You basically want to spike up your threat and build a huge lead between you and your DPS on the primary target, and then the secondary target can be targeted after. Now here you'll see an example where I tab target and kind of switch between both of my AoE targets, and sometimes this is necessary. If your DPS is split and everyone's just hitting whatever they want, you do need to tab around. You do need to make sure that you also single target a lot of these mobs, just because a single target ability will generate more threat than an AoE ability. And again, you do always want to make sure that all of your pull is standing on your AoE and that you're landing your cleaves, because if you start missing all of these abilities, you're not going to be generating as much threat as you should. A very basic and nice rule of thumb is the more DPS you do on a target as a tank, the more threat you're generating on that target. That also applies for moves. The harder an ability hits, the more threat it generates. Now this isn't true for all abilities. There are some abilities that generate heightened threat, but overall, the more damage you do, the more threat you're generating. Now let's go over single target threat and how to hold it. This also applies to raids. Basically, I went over the rotation for warriors. However, if you're not, you do have a target rotation. Now, if you are completely unaware of what your single target rotation should be, a very good place to start is Icy Veins. They're going to give you a very good place to start for your rotation. I'm not saying they're 100% correct, but they're a very good starting point. And from then on, you can go ahead and build on that rotation yourself. Now, as far as how to hold your threat, you need to make sure you're always covering yourself with active mitigation first, but after that, make sure you're landing a lot of hard hitting abilities. So in between using your active mitigation at all times, always use your really big damaging tank abilities. Now for warriors, this includes shield slam. Now as far as when you're swapping tanks in raid, you do need to be aware of something. There are some bosses, and most bosses actually, that when you're not actively tanking that boss, you don't need active mitigation up. So let's take Sendra, the first boss in Emerald Nightmare for example. When you're not tanking Sendra, you don't need active mitigation up. So if your active mitigation is in charges, or if you need a special proc or something, there's no need to be using your active mitigation abilities while you're not actively tanking. However, what you should do is save your big damaging abilities so that when you taunt, you use those big damaging and big threat generating abilities immediately after your taunt. The best practice for taunting off and holding threat is to make sure all your cooldowns, all your big abilities come off of cooldown. Taunt first, and what basically taunt does is it gives you a little bit more threat than the current highest person, which is going to be your other tank. You taunt first and then use your big damaging abilities and big threat generating abilities immediately after the taunt to be able to hold aggro. What this looks like for me as a warrior is, since shield block, my active mitigator, is off the global cooldown, I pop shield block and taunt at the same time, and I start hitting shield slam immediately after. Every now and then I throw a shockwave for some big damage or a revenge for some big damage, but normally a taunt and a shield slam is more than enough threat for me to hold that threat. So just make sure you don't use all of your big threat generating abilities right before you taunt. You should have DBM going and see some counters, so when you know you have to taunt, please hold on to those abilities. I see many tanks taunt and think that taunt is just going to stick and taunt is going to generate and hold threat for you, but it doesn't. Taunt just gets you a little bit above the level of the current highest person, and after 2 seconds taunt wears off. So you need to hit that threshold and then start generating more on top of that. That's really it when it comes to threat generation. One last thing that you should know is if all of your DPS outgears you by a severe amount, I'm talking 30-40 item levels, holding threat is always going to be a little bit more of a challenge to you, just because since they're outgearing you, they're doing a lot more damage, and sometimes that'll outdo the amount of threat your moves generate. So all in all, when you're doing AoE and cleave threat generation, you have to keep a nice rotation going. Use your cleave and your AoE off of cooldown while keeping your active mitigation up. Your active mitigation is #1 priority, because if you die, then the rest of your group wipes. 2 add-ons that I'm going to go ahead and recommend here for threat. Omen. I really like Omen. It's a nice chart. But also another one is Tidy Plates. Now what this does is it kind of shows you the way threat is on the HP plates for each mob. So if you lose threat on a mob, you can see it pretty clearly and you can click on that plate and taunt or start using some ability to start generating threat on them. If you're having difficulty maintaining all of your mobs that you're cleaving onto yourself, remember to tab target or to switch targets every now and then. Hit them with those single target abilities while your AoE cleaves are down, and just start spreading your threat a little bit more. You're gonna have to work harder for it, but you will most definitely always hold threat. That does it for this video. Good luck tanking out there.